Hello, my name is Adam Stockholm from Long and McQuaid. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest this evening. Patrick Sheridan is a world-renowned tuba virtuoso and a master educator. He is also the chief design consultant for XO Brass Instruments, the co-sponsor of this evening's workshop. XO Brass are being featured all month long in all Long and McQuaid stores and on our website as well. Without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Patrick Sheridan.
Hey everybody, good evening. So am I on now? My intro's done? It's time to rock and roll? Sweet. Hey everybody, great to see you. Sort of, I guess. I hope you can see me and hear me okay. And coming to you live this afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in Chandler, Arizona. I'm delighted if you're tuning in from wherever you are. We have begun to be in the 90-degree Fahrenheit range already, so we're already at that place where no more jackets and the shorts are out for the rest of the next 8 months for sure, probably till Thanksgiving. So anyway, what I want to do with you this evening, everybody out there, is talk a little bit about preparing to learn anything, and maybe the last year, everything's been contextualized in terms of the pandemic. But really tonight, when I'm talking about the word trauma, when I use it, if it's too strong of a word for you, I just replace it with the word stress. And then we're all talking about the same thing, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic. Stress exists, it's going to exist, and we need to have strategies that help us to be able to deal with it, particularly in the context of learning. Which has been the most interesting thing for me really since leaving UCLA as a professor in 2012. I spent quite a few years working with folks that had issues with their chops, whether it was in their fingers or their vocal cords or their lips, and found that the information that I use to help folks in those situations is the same information that I use when I'm working with people that have never played an instrument before and they're just beginning, and it's the same information I use from bachelor's through doctoral students when I taught at the various universities that I taught at. So I'm most interested now to really be able to share this information with anybody that'll listen because it's so important from the standpoint of acknowledging the neuroscience rather than understanding the kind of bias that we work under when we're trying to practice something, bias that's been I would say, I blame most of this at the feet of Hollywood in terms of the way human achievement is described. And when we see human achievement in Hollywood, it's always accompanied by 120 frames a second or 240 frames a second of this beautiful, gorgeous, creamy slow motion to show all of the action with a heightened string soundtrack and all of the elements that we can use visually and musically to create drama around a moment of human achievement. And what we never do see is a movie about the 3 hours a day of Michael Jordan shooting free throws, or the 2.5 hours a day of practice that Jens Lindemann does or used to do. Kidding. Those aren't interesting movies. We practice more than the length of a movie every single day, and that's not an interesting thing to show in terms of a piece of dramatic screen storytelling, and so we're programmed in our brains to feel like that achieving something is always something that we reach for, rather than something that we're just simply repeating that we did many times before, and then the idea of being able to do something like that in a performance situation or a high pressure situation where you can perform whatever that type of performance is with ease, with a feeling of relaxation, maybe even a feeling of joy. It requires that when you're learning the skills that are going to be required of that actual performance, that you're paying attention to what your brain is telling you, at the same time that you're paying attention to what your fingers or your chops or your ear is supposed to be doing to be able to produce whatever it is you're trying to produce. So that's what I want to talk about today, and I want to talk about it in the context of being able to play something, being able to play music if that's what you're learning to do, being able to bake better sourdough bread if that's what you're trying to do. This is some of the things that I've been doing in the pandemic when I'm not traveling anymore at all, which is baking better bread, pickling more things, like basically fermenting everything, and spending loads of time in the kitchen, working with my hands and my sense of taste to have something to do that's busy when I don't have concerts to prepare for. So, but using my other senses and appreciating an opportunity to have a chance to repeat things, which I think now if I was vetting a student for success, the thing that I would be most interested in terms of asking them a question on the way in the door would be, tell me something that you're currently doing in your life that requires repetition and what it is you love about that repetition. Because if you want to be good at a trade, of any kind of trade, whether it's teaching or playing an instrument or cooking, being a great plumber, anything that requires trade skills, you have to love repetition to be able to get good at it. And so I want to talk about that tonight. So I'm going to share my screen now. I've got some slides, and Adam, at the end of this, I'll send you the PDF stack, and if there's a way for people to get a hold of Long and McQuaid to disseminate this to them, you can put something out on the website, and I'm happy to have these shared with everybody. So let me get started. All right. So, you know, one of my tuba teachers in undergrad used to always ask me the question before I started a lesson. It was Dan Parentoni. He'd say, hey man, how's your girlfriend? And it didn't matter if it was a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever it was. He was just checking in with me before it was time for me to learn, to have a lesson, to see how I was doing. He didn't usually say, how are you stressed? He just asked me that really wide, open-ended question and let me talk. If I would say anything about anybody learning anything in the context of using a teacher and a guide, to remember that in this era of everybody being way too tested, way too assessed, that most of the time, when a teacher, especially in a musical context, is asking you a question, they're not actually asking you whether or not you know the right answer. They're not fishing for the right answer. What I'm asking for when I'm asking you a question in the context musically is, what do you hear? Where are you at? Tell me what your perspective is telling me so that I can either tell you that we're on the right path and bump you along the way, or redirect your attention to some other place because there's been some interpretation that's not quite on track. And as I said before, anywhere in this context of this PDF stack of slides that we're going to look at tonight, if the word trauma, when I use the word trauma, is too much for you, just remember that's a clinical term for stress. Just think of it as that. All right? So basically a negative life event, this could be any context of studying music, right? We don't need a pandemic to help us feel helplessness, right? F-sharp harmonic minor scale, if we don't know sharps, makes us feel pretty helpless, all right? So remember that trauma is an individual experience. Things that stress some people out don't stress others out, and your expression of it, sometimes you're aware of, sometimes you're not. And as I've been trying to emphasize, the origin of the word trauma does not necessarily need to be how Hollywood portrays it, which is a trauma center, and it's violent and it's abusive. Trauma is, I bumped my knee on the door frame today and had a minor trauma, a minor abrasion. So, right, so it doesn't have to be something that's that. But I want to use that word more frequently because it's actually the more correct word. It's more on point. Not a lot of times when we freak out about things, people ask us, hey, you need to calm down before, you just need to relax and calm down before you make any decisions. And that assumes a lot about somebody when we're in an emotional state that's out of balance, which is that we think first and then we have emotions on the other side of it, and that we're thinking machines rather than feeling machines. And this couldn't be further from the truth. Our body processes information with a sensory input that creates processing in our brain that makes a behavior happen. More specifically, the first thing that happens after the stimulus is an emotion, which is filtered by our nervous system, hopefully perfectly after the age of 25 when your brain is fully developed. Before that, you're clinically insane. I'm sorry, all teachers. And then we interpret that nervous system's idea of what happened to that emotion and behaviors created on the other side. So the fact of the matter is that human beings, we are feeling machines first, not thinking machines. So it's not this idea that we're this sort of like old 1970s Leave It to Beaver adage of, hey, if you're going to be upset about something, you need to calm down first. This is a wonderful tactic in the standpoint of negotiating or talking with somebody, but from the real idea of what's happening in your body. Emotions happen first, and sometimes our interpretation or our ability to filter them is poor. This often happens in the practice room. If you think about how you treat yourself in the practice room, most likely the things that you say to yourself in the practice room are not things that you would whisper in your grandmother's ear. Therein lies the problem. Let's talk about that. Physiological means physical. These are things that can be happening when you're stressing out about things, right? People that are stressing out about catching COVID or are decreasing their immunity for COVID, which I always find to be a lovely piece of Mother Nature irony. These don't all happen at the same time necessarily, but if you're experiencing one of these things and you hadn't before, chances are you're stressing. Chances are. I did not lose my hair from stress. That's genetic. Thanks. Moving on. All right, so we have basically 3 parts of our brain that we have to get in balance if we're going to learn anything. The prefrontal cortex is the part that you're using right now to listen. This is excuse me, your intellectual side. This is short-term memory. This is processing. This is where we're going to think about F-sharp harmonic minor when it's time to play F-sharp harmonic minor. And it gives us the right fingerings. It tells us what the notes are, the key signature, and what notes are altered in the scale. Right? It's stored down in the brainstem for later. And the limbic system is the one that gets in the way. All right? Why am I talking about the F-sharp harmonic minor scale? Well, in the tuba world, it's a famous scale because there was an Air Force band audition that came down to 2 people. And the colonel was listening to the 2 of them, and they played everything perfect. Nobody missed a note. Everything was going great. He looked at both of them and said, all right, fine, F-sharp harmonic minor. And the person that could play 2 octaves of the F-sharp harmonic minor scale won the job. So be prepared. But anyway, the limbic system in the middle is the one that freaks out. This is the one that freaked out when it's like F-sharp harmonic minor, go now, and we couldn't remember that the 7th was raised, right? In terms of the way life goes on, with the thinking part's the part we're talking about storing F-sharp harmonic minor, the feeling part is the part that's freaking out about the fact that we don't know it, and the breathing part's the survival part. I'm not talking about breathing to play with, like in the context of a tuba. I'm talking about just breathing to live. In other words, it's like, where are you going to store the memory of F-sharp harmonic minor? If you learned it yesterday, how are you going to recall it today? So that's how this goes. There's an intellect, there's an emotional side, and there's a survival side. More specifically, in terms of what's happening, these are the parts. So the prefrontal cortex works in congress with the hippocampus. Hippocampus takes short-term memories, converts them to long-term memories, and this is what is often impeded when we're stressed out. We hardly ever make a memory mistake if we're playing something by memory, and then we get in the recital and we have a memory slip because our hippocampus is being impeded by our amygdala. Our amygdala is the fight or flight muscle, quote-unquote muscle in our brain. It's the part of our brain that's scanning for danger all the time, making sure that we're going to be okay. Right? This is a leftover piece of DNA from when we used to live on the plains and we were worried about getting eaten by Simba, and it took care of us all the time. It scans for danger all the time. Well, if our perception is that something is bad and there's danger happening all the time, pandemic, then we could be under something that is making our amygdala fire all the time, which is called chronic stress. Chronic stress looks like this, and it means that our prefrontal cortex and our hippocampus shrink. That's what atrophy is. They get smaller, so it's hard to think about things to do now, and it's very difficult to remember them. And it's because our amygdala is in hypertrophy, which is swelling. It's working all the time, and it's impeding our ability to reason and remember. So when we're under chronic stress or trauma, these are some of the things that are going on in our body. Sometimes, not all of them at once, but sometimes. Loss of interest is very normal during the pandemic. It's a normal symptom of stress, right? All of these things are normal, actually, symptoms of stress. And when these things are happening, learning is impeded. Learning is very difficult. So our humanity comes down to this. We have a physical, intellectual, and emotional self, and they're wrapped together. When one moves out of balance, the other ones follow. All right? So if the physical self moves out of balance, you fall down the escalator and you break your leg, you're not in a great mood. Somebody comes up to me and is like, hey man, help is on the way. And you're like, I don't care, right? So or you have a temperature of 103. You're probably not in a great mood. Or you're in a really rough mood and you're fighting with somebody ridiculously. Pick an election cycle in the United States, right? 2 people emotionally arguing, displaying what? No intellect. Exactly. When one moves out of balance, the others follow. If you're a parent and you've been lied to by your children, in other words, they impeded your intellect by withholding information from you. When you found out what they did to the car, you have an emotional reaction. So when one is taken out of balance, the others follow. So the problem is, in the context of learning, is that the physical self and the emotional self are a spectrum, right? The physical self, you can be hot, cold, sweaty, pacey, itchy. This physical self has a variety of levels that are not neutral. Emotional self, the same thing. We can be neutral, we can be joyful, we can be enthusiastic. These are not negative to the intellect in terms of drawing our intellect out of balance. But then we can be bored, we could be sad, we can be depressed, we could be angry, we could be oboe, right? We could be completely out of balance emotionally. And the problem is that while the physical and the emotional sides are spectrums, your intellect is a switch. So as soon as you're a little bit out of balance physically or emotionally, your intellect has switched off and learning is impeded. So if you're in high school, for example, or college right now, studying a subject like math or chemistry or something like that, and you do your homework every night and you find yourself doing an hour in a row, for example, that the last 40 minutes are much more difficult than the first 10 minutes. And that's because most likely after the first 20 minutes, you start to physically go out of balance because you've been sitting for too long, probably not in a really great balanced position like you would be if you were going to play an instrument, for example, which, by the way, is a better way to keep your intellect awake. And so your intellect is switched off. Learning is hard. You get frustrated when you're learning, and then pretty soon you can't wait to be done with math or F-sharp harmonic minor or whatever it is. So we have to figure out a way to get things to go back to the middle when it's time to learn. That's why we practice breathing, is because tension's the enemy of life. I don't practice breathing because it's the most specific thing to playing the tuba. It is. I practice it for this reason, because I know that if I'm in the room practicing something like being a jerk to myself mentally when I'm practicing, then I'm practicing self-hate, and I'm making myself become skilled for self-hate. We also practice breathing from the standpoint of lung capacity. All right, normal, everyday, vital lung capacity is not very much of our lung capacity, and it sits down in the bottom portion of our capacity. You know, we know that's true. It's when it's time to answer somebody. You come down in the morning and your mom's making you breakfast, and she's like, "Oh, honey, what do you want for breakfast?" You don't have to go guacamole, right, to be able to answer that with enough authority in your voice. It's a small amount of air, and when we breathe in an athletic fashion, it's a similar amount of ease. It's just more rapid, when we're doing athletic breathing. When we sleep, we breathe much more relaxed at a certain portion of our sleep, especially if you're on your side or you're on your back. And this amount of air, about 70% of your lung capacity, is very relaxed. And we can use this for practicing. We can use this for playing our instrument. Do you need that amount of air to play the oboe? No. Do you need that amount of air to get yourself relaxed to play the oboe so this doesn't happen to you? Yes. So this is why breathing exercises apply to everybody in the band. They literally apply to the bass trombone and the euphonium below the staff and the tuba very specifically to use all of our air in a big, huge way. And to everybody else, it's overtraining for the purpose of neutralizing this and getting ourselves back to a place where learning is possible. So it's overtraining literally for an oboe player to blow like a tuba player, but at the end, they're still human, and so they still need to have their brains to be able to practice. So timed breathing is the part that really helps everybody in a band, in an orchestra, in a math class, for example. All right? So this is the stuff. You get that later. I don't want to sell on this. We know how to do this. I'll talk about this if we have a moment for it when we get there. But I want to talk about how we acquire skill. I'll come back to this. All right? So for me, this word talent is the worst word that I have in terms of teaching. Because for me, when somebody thinks that talent actually exists, for them it excuses practice. It excuses examination about whether or not what said thing that they are hoping to be talented at, if that's their feeling, is even possible. For example, if you're 4'9", joining the NBA is probably going to be a little bit more difficult than if you're 6'8" and you've played basketball forever. All right, so there are certain things that require. How about on the tuba? On the tuba, what's required in terms of natural talent? There's only one thing. The smallest mouthpiece that you could have for the tuba that would fit on a tuba has to have enough space to go from the bottom of your nose to the bottom of your top lip to fit about half of the mouthpiece there. And for most people, the smallest tuba mouthpiece will work, which means that there isn't any actual physical requirement to play the tuba other than that one. You don't have to have big lungs. You don't have to be a big person. You have to want to play the tuba. And you have to have enough space to get a mouthpiece up there. And when I say about half of it, I mean I know plenty of people that don't use half of the embouchure on the upper side. They use 60 on the bottom and 40 on the top, or even more upside down than that, and they play fine. Rare, but play fine. So talent, I hate this word. I used to hate it so much when my kids would talk about somebody else at school. When my daughter would say things like, "Oh, Dad, I want to be able to dance like so and so, but I can't because I don't have enough talent." And I would just boil about wait a minute, you haven't practiced dancing, and you haven't had a teacher, and You haven't had any guidance or any instruction, and you're looking at somebody who's been dancing for 6 years with great guidance and supreme instruction and a parental structure that offers them and demands of them repetition so that they invest in this skill that they're learning. So there isn't anything, in terms of talent, neuroscientifically, it doesn't exist. What does exist when we're looking at something that looks like talent is skill that's been highly acquired. Skill, basically, whatever those skills that come together, that's been repeated so much that it looks effortless, that it looks like they're not thinking about what they're doing, because it's become automatic. It's become a skill. It's become a habit. All right, this is a cross-section of your brain. Unless you play the triangle or the cowbell, then this is all of it. All right, there are more neurons in your brain than there are stars in the observable universe, so that means there's at least 7. All right, if we repeat an action in a neuron, so a neuron articulates action. It runs from our brain to all parts of our body. And when something goes through it, we play an F concert, for example, myelin forms around it. Myelin is a substance around the neuron that is electroconductive, so it invites the signal for F concert to use that neuron, and it makes the signal travel faster. So that means that on day 1, when F feels difficult, and on day 10, when it's starting to feel easier, this is the substance that's allowing for that to happen. It's allowing for that hippocampus to remember the fingering, the feeling, and the sound of an F concert, and then it reminds us to do it, and it won't let us play the F sharp or the B flat or the D natural or whatever that's close to it. It only allows us to play the F concert. And if we repeat it the same way over and over and over, knowing the components that go into it, pretty soon F concert comes out easily. We get more and more myelin, the skill becomes easier and easier, it becomes more and more automatic, boom, F concert happens. All right, the good news and the bad news about neuroscience in terms of learning is that the neurons that fire together wire together. So when you're learning, anything else that we're also doing all the time is eventually going to just happen automatically with it. So this can be good news and bad news. All right, this could mean some things like this. So if we want the right note to come out of a brass instrument, we have to be able to hear what we want to be able to do. Ba, ba, ba. If my ears hear it, my lips will follow. So if I supply air to my imagination, to my ears, they buzz the right notes, right? If I need ba-da-ba-da-ba, my lips will respond to whatever my ear is telling it. So if I keep the message simple and I keep it about tone rather than some sort of list of instructions, resonance happens because the machinery is simple and it's really the direct plug and play. What does it sound like? Ba, and your lips respond. Okay, so that's what needs to happen. So now we need to know how to break this apart in terms of learning. By the way, if you're a string player, a woodwind player, percussionist, it's the same thing. You have a technique of how to create the sound in your ear and bring it out. All right? So we're going to break this apart. Let's talk about it in terms of being a wind instrumentalist. I need to be able to hear what I'm going to play. I need to be able to have the right kind of air to be able to play it. And then eventually, boom, the F concert's going to come out automatically. All right? So I can practice these things in a trio where I would be practicing the song. For example, ba, 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 ba. So I can be singing it. I can be doing an air version. Right? Ba-da-da, ba. So I'm making sure that it's really in my head. So I practice one version where I sing it. I practice one version where I do some sort of a wind pattern this way or through my instrument with my valves, or a one-note version if it's loud and low. And then I put it together. So in this case, it would be an F concert. So I have a way to be able to break apart my skill set to be able to put it back together so that I'm only firing the myelin that I want to fire, and the neurons that I want to fire, wrapping the myelin that I want to fire, creating the skill that I want to skill about the things that I want, not the things that I don't want. But we have to consider also our thoughts. And really, before we knew about myelin, and before we really studied skill acquisition, and by we, I don't mean me, I mean neuroscientists. I only have 4 valves, clearly not a neuroscientist, that we didn't consider thinking to be a part of what we were doing so much. And in the middle of this pandemic, people's motivation's just gone right into the toilet. So let's talk about why we would want to do something and how we create motivation or how we create the right mindset in the practice room to make sure that we're not angry, that we're not practicing self-hate. All right? So 3 main pillars to getting yourself motivated. right? One is that you've got some choice when you're practicing. Like, how is this going to go? What key am I going to play it in? How fast is this going to go? When am I going to practice in the day? The other part of autonomy that's a little bit less stated, but I think is important, is self-respect. In other words, I'm about to be able to, I'm going to perform something. I have enough self-respect for the performance and for myself to invest the amount of time that I need to be good at something. All right, but mostly it's about choice. Then, if I'm going to have choice about what I'm practicing and be motivated, I need to know why the steps I'm taking are important. What does this connect me personally to the community I want to be in? If it's a tuba player, if it's a triangle player, if it's an orchestra, and why am I doing what I'm doing so that I can do what? So that I can become competent. We all have a natural need to feel better about what we're doing or good about what we're trying to attempt. So there has to be something at the end of the why and the process in our autonomy, in our practice session, that allows for competence to break out. When all of those three come together, motivation happens in the middle. All right? So now we know we have to get our mind ready to learn, and timed breathing is going to do that. So when our brain is finally ready to learn and we know why we're about to repeat what we're going to do, and we do it mindfully, carefully, specifically, skill happens. This is the truth about learning, and we have to make sure this is right. And if it's not, other things are going to happen. All right? It sounds like we're supposed to be easy on ourselves all the time. So I included this very quickly just so that you can take a look at like what I consider to be good pressure and what I consider to be a waste of time or unhealthy or destructive pressure, which leads to stress, which is traumatic. Cool? You're getting this. We don't need to talk about it. So this is what really needs to happen when it's time to play. And I will tell you that when I was in school practicing and I was late to every party and I was sort of almost late to lots of concerts, and everybody was giving me credit for being so disciplined to practice all the time, that I wasn't really specifically disciplined about practicing. What I was joyful about playing. I like to practice. So it was that I was having more fun playing my instrument than it was to run off to whatever said gathering on a Friday evening, for example, to be there first. I was happy to be there last and have a good time in the practice room on the way there. So I think it's really important to note that if you want to be good at anything, you can replace ear, air, and F concert with F concert, any skill you want to be good about, and ear and air with the steps you need to take to be good at that skill. If joy's not involved in it, you're not going to be specific, you're not going to be careful, and you won't repeat it enough times to be able to get good at it. So you can't actually get good at anything you want, like your mommy told you. That's a parenting lie wrought of the 1990s, wrought of the guilty, brought about by the fact that they worked all the way through the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. And this is not true. You can't be anything you want to be. And you're not that special neuroscientifically, maybe emotionally, to your mom. But that's it. From a neuroscientific standpoint, this is the truth. So we don't need to get all fussed up about what we need to know the steps to get good at the skill. And if we don't like doing it and we can't get ourselves to find a place of something that we like, then we're only going to bring frustration to whatever that pursuit is all the time because you've practiced it over and over and over again. So something to consider. Again, back to my question about, hey, Pat, if you were asking people on the way in the door for a college exam of like how you vet people of whether you think they can be successful as a college music major, which isn't the topic of this talk today, by the way, but it's an example. It would be, give me an example of something that you're doing in your life right now that you love to do because it's repeating, and what do you get from that repetition? And why do you like it? That would be number one. The other question that I would be asking somebody like that is, how does anything that you're doing right now in terms of repetition relate to a community? And how can you, in the context of music, share that with people? In other words, the things that you like to repeat, how are you going to find a community that appreciates what you're doing? If we're not thinking about those types of things on the way in the door, then we're looking for a handout in terms of a job, and we're assuming that the things that Hollywood tells us, which we're supposed to try really hard and gut it out, and it doesn't matter how much it hurts, and push through it, as being the truths about how you gain virtuosity. And this is not the truth of learning. This is the truth of a good script in Hollywood. A lot of times we take ourselves to the practice room because we think we're supposed to, right? Somebody said it's 10,000 hours to get really good, which is somewhat true if they're the right kind of 10,000 hours. So we just get in the practice room. Somebody said I got to play 3 hours a day, so I better play 3 hours a day. In my house here in Arizona, we flush duty. That's what we do here. The duty's not something that we do. All right, a lot of people are scared all the time of missing the wrong notes or doing something wrong, or it's like, am I going to make it? Am I not going to make it? And they're scared all the time. And then they're angry because they're making mistakes because they're too scared. Right? And then they're super judgy because they're angry and they're fearful. And then they wire together because the neurons that wire together fire together. and that's what that's called. And that's a thunk situation. Thunk, T-H-U-N-K, thinking in the past tense. You got there by thinking it too much. And pretty soon you couldn't stop thinking it, and then the thought of F concert makes all of those emotions fire. The thought of going to the practice room makes you angry. The thought of playing a concert makes you fearful. Because we thought it too many times. So be careful what you're thinking. This is what's got to be going on in the practice room, and that should be the first thing that we should be thinking. In other words, my little picture is wrong. I should have joy up at the top, and everything else should be underneath it. And that if we can't be at least neutral in the practice room, that we shouldn't try to practice anything. It's just simply not the time to learn when we can't treat ourselves properly, because learning will be impeded, and that emotion that we're learning with that impeded learning will imprint on that process. So, of course, you're going to hate calculus if that's how you always do it. Okay? Of course, brass players hate sharps because they never did it. All right? So we got to have an awareness tool, right? Because if you remember I should have put an extra slide in here. I'm sorry. I'm waiting for it to load. Oh, we're almost there. If you remember way back to this, which I'll leave on for a second, you'll remember that I said that your intellect is in charge of thinking short term, which means it's in charge of awareness, self-awareness. And the intellect is a switch. So the moment we become upset, the switch that would help us, if it was on, to be self-aware is switched off. So we can't be aware of the fact that we're becoming upset as we're becoming upset because of the nature of how our brain works, which really sucks. It's awful. How many times have you been sitting there in like some sort of pre-fight with somebody, thinking about meeting somebody, and then all of a sudden you relax and you get shorter because you've been squeezing your butt cheeks so much that you've been so stressed out about something that hasn't even happened yet, in a state of pre-fight. That physically we just, so make sure that you're not bringing that idea or those types of feelings into the practice room, ever. You have to have a methodology for that, and that's hopefully why we're here today. All right, memorize all this. Mark Priestler's a test at the end. Okay, excellent. So this is what we have to get to. So we have to have a methodology that helps us. But if we're upset, how do we become self-aware? We have to have a mirror that brings us back here. So this is my list. This is inspired by Jan Kagarice. She's a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Used to teach at UNT, now lives in Chautauqua, and continues to teach and help people that have problems with their chops and functioning. And this is one of the tools she uses to help create self-awareness. This is the list of things that I thought of in my ideas. She gave me a list. She gives lots of people this list. I use this list all the time. This is the things that I thought about, my awesome teachers that taught me, not necessarily tuba teachers or music teachers, but anybody in my family or teaching realm that taught me something. This is how they treated me. And this, by the way, are the things that we need to be thinking about if we're going to have healthy playing. All right. Then there's the bad list. Same thing. Personal reflection. Thought about all the bad teachers I had. Came up with the list. Noticed that trying to make it happen on the bad list. Letting it happen on the good list. Also noticed that these are organized in antonyms. So if you find yourself on the B list, all you have to do is slide over to the A list to find out where you are. So on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which you're going to get, you can print this out. You're going to cover up the B list and you're going to practice. And as you're practicing and things are going really well, you'll notice that your brain is in an A list sort of frame of mind. You'll be having a good time. There'll be flow happening. You'll be accepting. You'll be thinking about something to offer. You'll be focusing on the solution because you know that's the real deal. And when things start to go badly and the rhetoric in your brain is such that you wouldn't whisper it into your grandmother's ear, you're going to find yourself on the B list, and then you're going to slide across whatever thing is resonating the most with you on that B list and slide across to the opposite side to figure out what it is you're supposed to be doing. I'm going to send this list over. Adam, I'm also going to send a separate file that has this A list and B list empty as a Word doc so that those of you that get this can fill in for yourself and make your own list without having to retype any of the framework for it. All right? But this is the teaching list. This is my mirror for treating myself right and to remind myself that some of the things that are on the B list, like checking, like perfection, like focus on the problem because it's screwed up, like trying, like Hollywood told me to do, because if I don't try hard enough, then I don't get the Super Bowl medal or whatever you get. I think it's money. That's why I didn't get it, because I didn't try enough, right? And is this really not the process of making skill happen on the highest level? All right? So that's the part I want to talk about now, and then I want to jump into, I'll come back to what I want to talk about listening in a little bit. So we need a methodology for how difficult it is to learn to play the tuba. Oh, I'll come back to that. It's not as it's the same as playing checkers. There's a step process and practice. All right. So what I want to do with you while we're going through this is give you a way to be able to prepare yourself to practice. We've now known through many studies that have involved the breathing gym and not involved the breathing gym, that through your nose, through your mouth, getting your breathing cycle, which is inhale, exhale, as a one breathing cycle to 5 or less a minute, will do things that calm you down, bring your emotions back to neutral, physically get you to a place where your intellect switches on because of this physical timed breathing that you're doing. And there's a way to be able to do it in a way that teaches you to be able to breathe in an easier way, because most of us have a lot of odd ideas about how we're supposed to breathe. All right. So, spine is supposed to move in 6 different directions, whether we're sitting or standing. So we start all kinds of things that have to do with breathing by stretching. We're going to stretch our spine. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no pain, 10 being please end it now, this should never go past the dull 2. All right? Any sharp pain when we're doing stretching is your body saying no, and you should heed that. But a nice little dull 2 when we're stretching is the edge. And the other part of this should be that your breathing should be able to be smooth. So if the pain or the dull 2 in your definition is so great that smooth breathing is not possible, this is no longer a stretch. That's called torture. Don't do that. Please do stretching. So we're going to stretch our spine in 6 different directions. Then we're going to work out. We're going to get a little bit too full and a little bit too empty. All muscles in the body have an anterior muscle that does the opposite. So when one muscle is contracting, the anterior muscle is stretching. So in our body, when our diaphragm is contracting, when we're breathing in, all the muscles on the outside, for the most part, are stretching and relaxing and then stretching. They're doing the opposite. And by the way, those are the ones that we can feel. So this idea that there's effort to your inhalation that you can feel, most of the muscles that you can feel when you inhale are actually lifting your rib cage, and they don't have a lot of sensory neurons, and your diaphragm has 0, doesn't have any of them. So ideas about effort involved in inhalation from a sensory standpoint are false anatomically. It's just not how the body works. On the way out, until we get really empty, that last little bit, it's mostly just elastic recoil in our body that's making the air leave our body. And the mechanism that breathing is happening, in other words, our diaphragm is stretched out, it wants to go back to a state of repose, and as it does, it creates a positive air pressure. You open your mouth and air flows out. So that's the process. We want to engage those muscles, stretching and compressing on their edges. Why? Because it creates flexibility. That's why. It creates flexibility. The other reason why, if you're a teacher, is that this is the way to get around anybody whose sociological issues are holding them back from breathing. It might be that they don't want to look bad because the trombone section is checking them out in the flute section. It might be that they had issues with drowning because they almost drowned when they were a kid in the water. It could be a whole variety of social, emotional things that are going on with people that won't breathe. And all these exercises are simply meant to just break through that, because the effort required to do them makes the movement happen. And pretty soon they're doing things that they didn't think that they wanted to do, and they're getting great benefit from them because they feel better. And this is what will happen when we're doing this. Then finally, we're going to smooth that air out. We're going to make it more useful for playing a musical instrument. And that's the time breathing that's actually helpful on a more universal level, on a more holistic level, for neutralizing our emotions and getting our brains ready to be able to perform, to be good, to be razor edged when it's time to play. And it's also the good practice for treating ourselves the right way. So I would say that, when you buzz your mouth, so let's talk about brass specifically. You buzz your mouthpiece, your lips swell up. They swell up in about 45 seconds to their maximum. Then in the next 45 seconds of buzzing, they shrink a little bit, back to about 75% of where they were before. So that 75% swell is the warming up of your lips. Everything else you do when you're warming up is the same as calling a puffs tissue Kleenex. It's sort of a universal expression, but the warm-up is done. What's really basics routines, studying your basics every day, is a little bit about lip training and almost exclusively about brain training. When I sit down every morning from 7:30 to 9 o'clock and I play through my book, The Brass Gym, in a group context, and I work through those exercises, I'm not working on some sort of magic that's happening because I'm slurring and I'm going really low and really high and playing really loud and really soft and tonguing in all the ways that you can tongue on a brass instrument. There isn't any magic to the exercise. The magic's in the way I'm thinking. and keeping it simple and making sure that my brain is always requesting tone, and that my lips are given the chance to respond to that, and that when my brain starts to speak English or some other language that's not a part of tone, that I try to tune that language out. I don't want that there when I'm playing. I just want tonal information when it's time to play. And that, by the way, when I'm practicing that, is also the hedge against nervousness. If my normal habit is to recall tone when it's time to create tone, there's no space in your brain for trauma, for stress. So that's one of the hedges. All right, so let's breathe. Let's do that. I'm going to adjust my mic. I'm going to adjust my laptop just a little bit so you can see me when I step back, and let's stretch out a little bit together because we have time for that. Adam, are we cool? Awesome. Super. So, spine's supposed to move in 6 different directions. Let's do that. All right, so on a scale of 1 to 10, no more than a dull 2. So, hands out to the side. Twisting left, twisting right. When you look over your shoulder, breathe out. Put your hands over your head and stretch, push up for my belly shot. And then finally, let your hands go like you're in first grade recess, right? Your band director's looking for you. Where's that little kid with those drumsticks? All right, very cool. Roll it out. I'm noticing in the mirror here that this is a little bit crooked. I got to help him out. All right, so that's 2 of the 6 different directions. Twisting left and right. Now we're going to go laterally left and right. So with your left hand, grab your right wrist behind your back. I'll be your mirror today. Breathe in. Put your weight in your heels. Make your legs straight and relax your shoulders. On the exhale. Good. Breathe in again. Lean your head to the left. On the exhale, and breathe in again. Move your hips to the right and let your head and body come even further to the left. And breathe in and out. And in and out. And if your weight comes into your toes, move it back to your heels so that you have a line from your shoulders to your hips to your knees that's that way, rather than your back too arched or too much this way. All right? So lateral twisting. Good. Come back up. Let go. Roll it out. Lateral bending, excuse me. Grab your other wrist with your other hand. Breathe in. Breathe out. Put your weight in your heels. Keep your legs straight. Breathe in again. Let your head go to the right. Breathe in again. Head right. Body left. And push your hips to the outside and feel the stretch all along your body, from the top of your head all the way on the outside of your body to your feet. And breathe in and out and in and out and hang out. Beautiful. Roll back up. Let go. Roll it out. Shake it out. 4 of the 6 directions accomplished. All right? This one we're going to go backwards. Let me show you first. So my toes and heels are together. My thighs are tight. My glutes are tight. My hands are on the back of my hips, like my mom when she's angry with me, right? She's always like, "You did what?" One of those like that, right? So it's like this. And what I'm going to do, all I'm going to do is lean back and breathe. I'm pushing my hips in front of my body, and my eyes are looking for the room behind me, and I'm just supporting my back that way. That's all that's going to happen, all right? On the way back up, just think about a shelf being up a little bit higher than your chin, and when you come up, try to put your chin up on that shelf. All right? Let's do it together. Toes and heels together. Thighs tight. Glutes tight. Support your hips in the back. Breathe in. Look up. Breathe in again. Hips go forward. Head goes back. Keep the weight in your heels. Keep your legs tight. Keep your glutes squeezing together. And stretch. Only go as far as you can breathe smoothly. If your breathing's choppy, your thoughts are homicidal, this is too deep. Don't do that, okay? Let's roll back up. Put your chin on that shelf. And then roll it all out. Shake it all out. Nice and loose, nice and balanced. All right? When I talk about balance, there's 6 balance points in your body that I want you to balance. The first one's right behind your eyes. That's where your skull and your spine come together. That's your atlas occiput joint. It's not back here where your head is attached to your neck. It's in the middle of your head here and here, which is right behind your eyes. So when that point matches where your sternum and your clavicle come together, which is the actual end of your arm, bone to bone is here. And then that's over your hips and over your knees and over the arch of your foot, and the small of your back's in the middle of that. When those are lined up, breathing is easy. When something goes out of balance, one way or the other, twisting left, twisting right, euphonium players, tuba players, right? We're impeding our ability to be able to breathe. So that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to find a place where those are all in balance. And that's why, by the way, when somebody says, don't go to your instrument, we would say that. I want the instrument to come to me so that I can stay in perfect balance so that breathing can be easy. If I have to go to something, I'm out of balance, my body has to now hold to keep myself from falling over. And the muscles in your body are designed for pushing, pulling, and rotating. They are not designed for holding. They will hold to keep you from falling over, as will my calves and my glutes and my hamstrings when I'm leaning too far forward. But if I come back to a place of in the middle, that tension drops. And that's where I want to be when it's time to play. Okay? So let's do the last direction of the spine, which is curving forward. When I'm curving forward, I'm always leading and ending with my chin. So my chin goes down first, and when I come back up, my chin comes back up last. That's how it's going to work, and that keep your back safe the whole time. So I'm not ever going down and up like this. Why? Because I care for your back. That's why. All right? So feet are now hip width apart. Everybody's hips are this far apart. You put your hands together like that. Put those between your two big toes at the front of your feet. That is the distance of your hips apart. That's right. Big hands, big hips. Beautiful. So now we're going to go up and down this direction. When I'm upside down, my chin is tucked to my chest, so my eyes are not actually looking at the floor. They're looking at the room behind me because I'm looking through my legs. All right? And you're just trying to open up. I'm thinking about stretching in two ways. I'm trying to think about my hips going up when I breathe in and my head going down. So when I'm upside down, it looks like this. When I breathe in, hips up. And when I breathe out, head down. When I breathe in, hips up. When I breathe out, head down. This is how I'm trying to make my body stretch. All right? So let's do it together. So everybody, feet shoulder width apart, hip width apart, right there, that far. Breathe in, tuck your chin to your chest. Do it again. Curl your spine down until you're upside down. Use your eyes to look at the room behind you. Now breathe in, move your hips up, and now breathe out. Let your head go down. Let's repeat that. Breathe in, hips up, breathe out. Head down. Let's do that one more time. Breathe in, hips up. Breathe out, head down. Now relax. Think about the back of your legs relaxing. Your calves, your hamstrings, your glutes. Now think about the small of your back, the middle of your back, your upper back, your neck, your head, all relaxing. Like you're hanging over a pole, right? Beautiful. Bend your knees, arms trail behind. Keep your chin on your chest. Roll back up. Chin comes up last. Use your hands over your head and sigh. And roll it out and shake it out. Beautiful. Find that place of balance. If you're not sure where balance is, then use imbalance to help you locate it. So you're like, I'm not really sure if all those 6 balance points are lined up. Lean too far forward. Now do you feel the tension in the back plane of your body? Move towards the tension until it drops from your body. And when it does, that's the middle. Same on the back end. If you move to the back too much, the tension transfers to the front of your body. Move towards the tension until it drops from the muscles in your body. That's the middle. That's where we want to be. It's the same when we're seated, and we'll get there when we get there. All right? Said Mr. Incredible. I love that movie. So, now that we've stretched 6 different ways, now it's time to be too full and too empty. Let's do that. So 5, 15, 5. Breathe till you're as full as you can be and hold your breath, and I'll talk to you then. Here we go. In and eighth notes, breathe in and sip, 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 sip. Now you're really full. Relax everything. Your glutes, your neck, air doesn't go in there. Sip again and again and again and again. Relax everything. Don't lock your knees. Relax. Sip, sip, sip. Good. Now blow the screen over. Out. Hiss. And a big sigh. And let go. Beautiful. If you're a vocalist that you've tuned in today, awesome, thanks for being here. The only difference in breathing gym exercises for vocalists and everybody else is that right there, the sigh. The sigh is really rough on vocal cords. So what vocalists find helpful in this context is to go, ooh, do one of those beautiful vocal sirens that helps you warm up that part of your body when you're engaging in a sigh. So use a vocal siren or use a sigh, whichever works for you. If you're a vocalist, I definitely recommend the siren. But other than that, all the exercises that are involved in these are super helpful for vocalists. Why? For that part about that tension is the enemy of life. It's overtraining, right? Cool. So let's do that again. 5, 15, 5. In 16th notes. Get as full as you can and hold your breath. Here we go. In, breathe, in. Now you're full. Relax your body. Sip again, and again, and again, and again. Notice what's getting tight. Notice what's not involved in breathing, and you're engaging. Let it go. Sip again, and again, and again, and again. Fuller, 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 fuller. Relax. Fuller, fuller. Out for 5, loud as you can. Yes. And sigh or siren. Ooh. Beautiful. So now we've worked out a little bit. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to flow, which we're going to do to a time. All right, I'm going to use a met. And our goals here are now completely different. And now is when I need that other slideshow. Go back to my slides here. Give me a second. Here. So we stretched out, we worked out, now it's time to work on some flow. The flow rules are right underneath it. So always comfortably full to comfortably empty, never more than that. What shape? Like you're saying oh or whoa. Why? It gets everything out of the way. It's the most open. It gets all the structures out of the way without instructing the tongue, the jaw, the throat. Just think oh and breathe in. Breathe in even. That'll tell you if you're too full or too empty. And always breathe. Don't stop to turn it around. Why? And what's in to out? That's the beginning of the note. That's articulations. What's out to in? That's your release. It's the end of the note. Equally important in the context of music, right? So work on a smooth turnaround from in to out, out to in. Make sure that it's even, that there's not a sforzando on the first 16th note of your exhale because you actually got past comfortably full. Work on your form. When you screw it up, notice what went wrong and correct on the next time through. There's not magic to that we're doing so many of them. There's magic if you get the flow form correct. Then really great things start to happen for your body and your mind. So hopefully you can hear that over my air conditioning, which if you can believe is actually running in Arizona. And let's breathe in and breathe out. We're going to go 6 beats in, 6 beats out, and work on one of those parts of the form and move over that range. That relaxed flow range. That's the range that you're going to use those rules. All right? And let's go 6 in and 6 out. Let's use our hands like this. Here we go. 6, oh, breathe. Out and do it again. 6 in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Comfortably full is right here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Comfortably empty is now in 2, 3, 4, 5, out and one more time. Try 7. 8. Out and big sigh or siren. Ooh, beautiful, awesome. Roll it out, shake it out. If you notice some corrections that needed to happen based on that flow form in front of you, now you know you have something to practice. Let's make it more applicable. In other words, how often do we breathe in for 6 beats when it's time to play? Exactly, probably never. But 2 beats in, lots. 1 beat in, more frequently. 8th note and 16th note breath, almost all the time. Most of our breathing is a quarter, 8th, or 16th. So why practice a slow inhale? Why practice the last variation of Carnival of Venice slow? Thank you. For the same reason. Because this action is highly coordinated. To go in really fast and then out slowly in a coordinated musical way is extremely coordinated for the body. We have to practice slowly. We have to practice a slow inhale to make sure that when it's time to breathe quick, we do it with great form, not filled with what most quick inhaling, that's a reaction to the amygdala, which is all right, fight or flight. We don't want that. We have to have something else that's practiced and more virtuosic, more beautiful in terms of our breathing. So work on that. So let's go, we'll bring the inhale down. So we'll start with 6 and 6, then we'll go 5 and 7. Just follow me. The main thing is that these rules stay the same. So if you go in for 2, it's still the same amount of air. In for 2, in for 6, in for 28 is still just that amount of air moving at a different pace. Okay? So follow the rules. Let's start with 6 in. In, breathe. Blow on your hand for 6. Breathe in for 5. Out for 7. In for 3. Out for 8. In for 2 and 1 8 and 1 10. 1 10. 12. 11 and 12. Breathe on the last 16th of 12. 8. Now a big sigh, ready, and let go. Beautiful. 12 beats out. The smooth air movement exercise of the brass gym, for example, a Kodai exercise. 1 5 1 2 5 3 1 5 1. So for me, in that instance, 112. That's one of my tonal incentives. Let's do another one. Let's do O Canada. Let's just start with that. Right? Bo, 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 bo. Like this, all right? Nice fortissimo. In fact, none of you we can't even hear each other. So if you're a fan of the Star Spangled Banner in 4/4, let's go at the same time. Let's create some Charles Ives of anthems. The Ives anthem. Here we go. In wind pattern, in beautiful, in whatever key, in mezzo forte. What's mezzo forte? It's about halfway out. Where's fortissimo? All the way out. Where's pianissimo? Real close, right? Want to try them? Make them feel the same. Change your air based on where that is. All right, here we go. O Canada. 1, 2, and. Beautiful. Let's do that again. Let's go all the way out to fortissimo. Same chunk. O Canada. Star Spangled Banner in 4. Doesn't matter. Here we go. 1, 2, and. Now do it pianissimo. Now I'll start to crescendo. All the way out to fortissimo. Right. Big sigh. Let go. I'm running out of time, so I want to do this seated. So now come back to a place where we're sitting, if you weren't already. Let's talk about good posture for sitting down. What is a good seated position for breathing? One that allows for free and easy breathing. That's the one. So it's really easy to explain, and it's not the way we used to teach it. We used to teach sit up straight, feet flat on the floor. This is beautiful for 3rd graders, 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders. It's great for little people when they're learning. It's not later. So we're going to learn this now, right? Which is to sit balanced over the bones you're sitting on with your knees below your hips. So let's talk about that briefly, and let me get rid of this share screen here for a second. So when I'm seated in a chair, I use actually a bench that allows for the seat to go up and down because I like to have my feet flat on the floor when it's time to play. So when I'm sitting in this chair, which is a Hercules bench, my knees are below my hips when I'm sitting balanced on my hips. By balanced on my hips, I mean not too far forward and not too far back. You can tell if you're too far forward or back by the fact that the bones that you're sitting on, these ones right back here, see if you can see that back there. Let me move his hand. Great, right here, this is rounded, all right? So, and if it wasn't rounded, when you were moving, you would ratchet because there would be corners to those bones. But there's not. It's a rounded bone. It's a U. And if you sit too far forward, you're sitting on the back of your legs and on the leg of that U. I want you to come back to the bottom of the U. If you sit too far back, you're sitting on this leg of the U. Come to the middle of the U, and if you find that it's difficult to sit over that portion of the bones that you're sitting on, your ischial tuberosities, your left and your right, your butt bones, the bass trombone definition of those, then put your knees below your hips. If you're sitting in a chair that doesn't allow for your feet to be flat on the floor, then cross your ankles, all right? And that'll make your knees go lower than your hips, and sitting becomes much easier. Should the U of what you're sitting on be past the edge of the chair? No, it should be on the chair, all right? But not too far back so that your thighs can't move down when you cross your ankles. So cross your ankles, knees are below your hips, you're sitting nice and balanced. Let's do the same thing. Let's breathe in, 1, and let's do a little bit of Banner or O Canada. Do your anthem from wherever you're from. Here we go. 1, 2, and. Now lean too far forward. Now come back to the middle. Lean too far back. Feel the tension. Now move towards it till it goes away. Ba 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 ba. Right, very good, like that. So it should feel much easier when you're seated in this position. So that when you bring an instrument to you, when it comes, no mouthpiece in here, so that when it comes to you, that it comes here. You don't go to it. It comes always to you. Always to you every single time. The same with the tuba. And the tuba, by the way, may be more unergonomic than the euphonium in terms of its ability to take you out of balance. Whether it's from here or here where we sort of slide into the tuba, make sure that you get your posture perfect, bring the instrument to you, and if there's still a gap and the tuba's too short or too tall for you, then get a tuba stand, right? I don't travel with a tuba stand, but I practice with one every day. It's here all the time when I'm playing. It's what my tuba is sitting on now to allow that when it's time to play, that the mouthpiece always comes to the right place every single time. So that's a memorized thing for me and a feeling of ease. All right, what do I do with the euphonium when I'm playing the euphonium? Right, to keep it from bringing me too far forward. This grip here, trying to find a place of relaxation. That's one of the things we thought about when we were doing the XO euphonium, for example, was trying to find that nice balance so that when it sits in your hand, it doesn't feel like it's moving too far this way, and that it feels mostly like it's going this way in your hand, so that the balance is a little bit easier. Is there an ergonomic factor for this? Of course. Is there an ergonomic factor for bassoon? Yes. Is there an ergonomic factor for the tuba? Yes. Is there an ergonomic factor for the double bass if you don't have a huge reach? Yes. Those are things that you have to learn to accommodate for if that's what's happening. And quite often, which is, I think it's a responsible thing to say at this moment, you don't see those types of accommodations happening from professionals because the instruments they're playing were made for them. This is absolutely the case for me. This tube was made for me. So the height from the bottom of the bow to the lead pipe is exactly correct for me. And unless you're exactly my height, you're going to need a tuba stand for that to be feeling like it's not going to pull you out of balance. All right? So that's the truth about sitting and playing, especially a low brass instrument. I would say trombone, bass trombone equally as different ways of pulling you, but have equal ergonomic issues, especially when we're talking about 6th and 7th position and having to function a couple of triggers. Things can become very, and we have to making sure that we're thinking about those types of balance issues all the time. And I would say that there are days, well, when I used to travel on a plane, but when the optimal physical condition is not happening at the beginning of a session, I find myself investing more in stretching and less in the middle part, the workout therapy part. And on days when the air is really bad or I have a lot of allergies, I find myself working out in the middle part of the breathing gym sequence where I'm trying to get really full and really empty just to get some feeling of a range of motion happening because it feels labored to breathe because of air quality issues or physical issues related to the air quality, for me in the case of allergies. And then on pre-performance or on days where I'm working on big, long amounts of phrasing, I'm spending much more time in the first part and the third part and not so much in the middle in terms of the workout therapy part, where I'm doing lots of flow exercises in the breakout where I'm thinking about my ear, my air, and then putting it together. So that's really for me what's necessary. And I find myself using the A list and the B list to determine when it's time to breathe again. So when I end up on the B list and I can't, I'm practicing self-hate instead of the things I should be practicing to play music, then I stand up and breathe. I stand up and I stretch and I wait for my brain to return to a place where I feel the rhetoric that's so negative can be controlled or at least assuaged with some tonal input. And when there are days when I can't. In other words, there are days when the information in the world or the information in my world is too upsetting to allow for my brain to be cool to play. And so guess what? I don't play. I've also given myself that permission, which is if my brain's not in the right place to learn, I don't try to learn. And I try to remember not to do that because I'm just practicing skills that I don't want later. So if, in other words, well, but I can only be nice to myself for 5 minutes. Okay, great. So practice for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes today without the 55 minutes of being in the room for an hour, which duty told you were supposed to be there, which was full of fear and anger and judgment. On day 2, you're going to have 110 days of fear, anger, judgment, and duty, and 10 minutes of great practice. It's a hole you're never going to get out of. You'll never recover from that. So I would rather if you only did 5 minutes a day of beautiful practice. After a week, you'd have this huge head start. Instead of hundreds of minutes of bad practice, you'd have 60 minutes of beautiful practice. So I think this is a much more important thing. Is it only going to ever be that way? No. And if you're like, well, I can never treat myself right, then start there. Then you need to start there. Right. But the people that have long, healthy, interesting careers in all pursuits are not great practicers of self-hate or anything else on the B list. They treat themselves and others like many things on that A list. And so those are the things that are requirements. And I would say that of all of my friends that are really great musicians, really great dancers, really great computer programmers, really great folks that work in the musical instrument business in all facets, their skill sets are not filled with things that you see on the B list, especially those that are successful, that have large networks and wonderful connections and success in the social circles that they work in, because they're good people. And you have to treat yourself the same way if you're going to learn well, if you're going to learn efficiently. And to remember that you're supposed to, when you saw the movie Whiplash, you were supposed to have laughed. That was supposed to be caricature so over the top that it made you laugh hysterically. It did for me. It was like, I had teachers like that. I went to an all-boys Catholic military high school. You kidding me? I had Christian brothers that were as insane as that guy was on Whiplash. But I mean, we laughed at them too, just not to their face. But I mean, it's like that. It's like that. You only don't have a choice in high school because you can't drop the class. As soon as you get to college, that teaching doesn't have any kind of gravitas anymore. You just drop the class, you go somewhere else. But that you should be remembering that when you see those things. Like, I'm usually the one inappropriately chortling loudly in a movie when the slow motion starts up right before somebody lands on the moon or wins a gold medal. I'm like laughing hysterically at all of the cheap Hollywood tricks that are being used to make the moment happen, when I know that the moment happens like that, and what really happened was a ton of practice that nobody saw and nobody filmed and nobody wrote about and nobody cared about. And if you want to be great at anything, that's what's required. So I would say, if you want to figure out, like, well, what do you want? How can I know if I'm going to be great at something? Well, first, search for the things that you like to do. Because if there's something that you like to do or love to do, you'll be much more careful about doing it, and you'll repeat it more than most people. And that repetition the right way is really the key. But it's that part, which is it's the right repetition. It's not just duty. It's like, because I met plenty of people that were like, I practiced more than you in school, and it didn't work out for me. Why is that? It's like, well, it wasn't just about time. It was about the kind of time that's happening. So make sure that how you treat yourself is a part of what's happening when you're in the room with yourself. You have to be the great teacher at the same time that you're a great learner. Or the little kid in you is just going to shut off when the big kid in you goes, man, that sucked so bad. Enough times, the little kid just shuts off. So the one that's in first grade that used to be swinging their feet, can't wait to get in the band room, is now waiting to get out and doesn't want to be there. And the horror person in you is making you stay in the room with duty and fear and anger and judgment. So be careful what you're practicing. Okay, let me see some questions here. Double basses. How difficult is it to learn to play the tuba? If you play the double bass already, I think you'll find that the personality and that the efforts in terms of the large movements, it's not like little and specific like the oboe, that you'll take to it very quickly. Your ears are already accustomed to hearing in that range, and it's just a matter of putting something in front of you. And that bass, that double actually was the normal double until sort of the late 1970s, early 1980s, when tuba bass trombone began to be the double that was written in the Broadway books. But prior to that, like when Sam did the opening of Chicago, the musical in 1971, it was a double bass tuba book. So I think it's a great double to learn, actually. So I'd say go for it, Roots Bass Canada. Lee Post, is it ever okay for a student to play trombone left-handed for comfortability? Huh. Listen, I thought conducting with the baton in the other hand was like, and then I saw somebody do it well, and then I was like, well, I guess it doesn't matter. It's just a mirror, right? I mean, if I can't. I don't want to say no because you're like, wait a minute, you can't do that. But I would say that probably there's more success long term of playing it the way it's supposed to be played than the other way around. Oh, for sure. Let me see this next one from Beth Q. Eliminating self-hate and self-judgment during practice is a great thing to teach students in the early stages of learning so it does not become habit. Yeah, I totally agree. In other words, I feel like that when I learned to play my instrument, things about what to do with my air and what to do with my ear were part of learning, but nobody was asking me to be, making sure that I was entering the practice room in the right state of mind, or giving me any sort of tool that if it wasn't in the right state of mind, that if I went through a practice session like we just did together with breathing and stretching, that I could actually make my mind go to a place where it would become ready to learn. And as long as it was aware, and we have a list like the A list and the B list, I think those are things that are really, really great. I have many students who have taken this A list and B list that don't work in music, and they have it at their job, wherever they're whatever, they're vice president of whatever, and their little A list and B list is right there by their laptop as well. So I think this is good stuff. 65-year-old man be focusing on for blowing exercises. Everything we did, Mr. Dunk. I'm not going to ask you the obvious question, but I am a fan of the NBA. I would say the main things are all of them. In other words, like great to stretch, to get ready to breathe. It's really good to be doing some things where you're really full and really empty. The exercises that we did in sort of very light versions that were helpful to folks that were in their that were far older than you, Kevin, that were in their late 70s and early 80s with COPD and other types of respiratory issues, found great feeling of safety and feeling better, and not like they were gasping for air, to go through a light routine of all three areas, to stretch their spine, to get too full and too empty, and then to smooth the breathing out to a nice, relaxed and comfortable way. And we did some real baby versions of that tonight. But you can take I've done yoga classes where the yoga instructor at the end will go into a breathe, suspend, breathe sequence where it's breathe in, suspend your air, which is like hold your breath, and then breathe out, and where he's breathing in and suspending and out, so that the breathing cycle is about one breath about every minute and a half to 2 minutes. And that's after we're working out and everybody's sweating and hot, and he's managed to slow his breathing down to like 45 seconds in, 45 seconds hold, 45 seconds out, and repeat and repeat and repeat. Super slow, super slow. So all of these things can be worked out to that level, as well as from working them the other way, which is from 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s to 8th and 16th notes. Part of that is to get even on the way out and the way in, and part of that is also for hyperventilation reasons, to train ourselves to learn to accommodate to that. Because I think almost every brass player's had a moment in a piece of music where we're playing really loud for an extended period of time where we get a little bit dizzy, and that dizziness, that discomfort, doesn't create the best habits. So if we can learn to make that go away or push it down the road a little bit further because we're more accommodated to that, it's better for performance situations. Okay, when you have any tips on organizing practice time, especially when you have limited time? Yeah, I mean, I had children in the year 2000 was when my daughter came in 2000. Now, she's now 20. I'm going to be 21 this year, and my son is going to be 19 this year. So they're in college, they're gone. But when they were born, that was the best focuser of time, because you never knew when you had to change a diaper or prepare a bottle or whatever, in terms of parenting. And so practicing became much more focused, because they'd go down for a nap, or they'd be occupied with the truck for 45 seconds. I could run over and do something. And I actually found that type of practice actually was much more helpful than the kind of practicing I was doing before that, which was trying to find these big expanses of time and then get it all done in 1 or 2 sessions a day, rather than feeling like I could come to my instrument 4, 5, 8, 10 times a day, which was actually more like I practiced in high school, which was really early in the morning, got to school, played a little bit, ran down at lunch, played a little bit, played after school a little bit, did some homework, and I was rewarding myself between each subject with playtime. So I think that's a good way to do it. I also do it very specifically when I'm cooking. My kitchen's right over there, about 10 steps from my spot in my studio here. And that's my other hobby, and I'm a total snob about it. So I don't want to burn anything. I don't want anything to cook too long or too hot. So I find that like throwing the onions on and coming to play one measure for 1 minute is a great way to, number one, make sure the onions don't burn, but number two, get something very specific done for 1 minute. I don't feel like people really do that kind of practicing. And you can't practice a phrase in 1 minute. You can practice 2 notes in 1 minute. You can practice one measure in 1 minute. And if it's something going by quick, you get 10, 15, 20 reps in a minute done on one thing, which you probably wouldn't have done before. So I would say, limit your practice time, put together a to-do list for that practice time, and knock it out. And keep it organized by time, and move on when it's time to move on, because we're not trying to make it happen, we're trying to let it happen. And that means means it's a journey. So put the time in today, then move on to the next subject, and the next subject, and the next subject. So bound it for sure. Tips for breathing for asthmatics. Yeah, breathe. It's the same thing. My tuba teacher from Nebraska, Bill Winkle, attributes more to his recovery in his later years of his life to doing breathing gym exercises than he did to riding his bicycle and doing his swimming, which is what his asthma doctors told him to do. He did all three, but he found the most improvement by finding 30 minutes to 45 minutes a day of doing a pretty intense breathing exercise, because asthmatics need flexibility, and this will provide that. It was for many years, the first DVD was actually prescribed at Banner Healthcare here in their pediatric asthma department. They just gave the students the breathing gym DVD to use. So it works. It's very helpful, and just know your limit and make sure that you're safe. What other kinds of questions we got? Are there tips with playing a tuba while marching? Yeah, be careful of your face. Difference between a 3-valve tuba and a 4-valve tuba. 1 valve, buddy. Thanks, I'll be here all day. So, can you practice using more air without increasing the speed of the air through the horn? Okay, Sam, you got to understand the difference between air speed and and flow rate. And flow rate and air speed are opposites. So most low brass players talk in flow rates. To get rid of my air quickly, I have lots of flow, right? At slow air, which to me doesn't make sense, but it's flow rate at a very high rate. So flow rate means very low pressure. High flow, low pressure. More pressure in your mouth, less flow, like playing the trumpet. So I think for myself, I think in flow rates because that makes sense to me. And when I'm working with a brass player, I try to get by inquiry to try to figure out if their understanding is based on airspeed or flow rate, excuse me. And if they're more of a flow rate person, I talk flow rate, and if they're an airspeed person, I talk airspeed. That didn't answer your question because your question is a paradox. So, okay, Buck, okay, 3 valves, 4 valves. On a 3-valve instrument, I've got one here. Let me get but the valves are dry because it's the desert. If you don't oil your valves every 5 minutes, they dry out. So on a 3-valve instrument, sorry, I'll turn down. I'm sorry, I'm blowing your ears out. These are the only notes I have, and then I don't have any more notes. So if I'm playing, I'm down to a low E from B flat. I don't have any more valves to push. Now the next note's a low B flat, so I'm missing E flat, D, D flat, C, and B natural. Those notes are not available on a 3-valve instrument down low. So what do? You need a 4th valve. So on a 4-valve instrument, oh man, these valves are dry. So same notes. All right, so that's all the valves. Now, the valves in numbering add up to each other. So 1 and 3, 1 plus 3 equals 4. So that's the same fingering, right? So 1, 2, 3 is 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6, 2 plus 4 is 6. So those are the same fingering. So now I can utilize those, but I can use this valve, my 4th valve, on a compensating instrument, basically like an octave key. So the difference between a 4-valve and a 3-valve is that in the lower register, you have the whole chromatic scale. That's the main difference. And that for the notes that are normally too sharp, those types of notes that are 1 and 3 on a trumpet or on a marching euphonium where you'd need to put out the 3rd slide or the 1st slide, they're taken care of by the compensating system. So when you push the 4th slide down, so that's more in tune. 1 and 3. That kicker is now in the length of the slide, compensating for that sharpness on the euphonium. So that's not only the difference between a 3-valve and a 4-valve, but the difference between a non-compensating and a compensating instrument. Sorry, Buck, for the snarky reply, but I couldn't help it. All right. Oh yeah, sorry. There we go. Yeah, non-playing levels. So I hope that answers that question for you guys, and this is clear for everybody. Can I share the Bumblebee story? Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So I always wanted to play Flight of the Bumblebee, and I had a recording of John Fletcher playing it with the Philip Jones Brass Ensemble. I think it was on their Lollipops record, and I listened to it all the time as a kid, and I couldn't even conceive of moving my fingers that fast, or tonguing, or anything as fast as he was going. And I think it was about like a quarter note equals 176 or something like that. It was a very great, awesome tempo and beautifully clear, and he just played so great. And so I got in the Marine Band and wanted to do some solos, and I'd done a couple things already, and Colonel Bourgeois was like, well, what do you want to play? Because this is the arranger, Stephen Bulla, and he'll just arrange whatever you would like to play. So tell him what you want to play, and we'll arrange it. So I just blurted out The Flight of the Bumblebee, and he's like, great, we'll do it, and we'll do it at the end of the summer. So it was like 8 weeks away. So I just got signed up for a song I hadn't learned yet, and so I went home and made the arrangement and put it in the key. And of course, it's in an odd key on E flat tuba, because on a brass instrument you want the key of your instrument to be the dominant of the key of the piece, and the piece is in minor. So I would play E flat tuba, so the dominant E flat is the dominant of A flat, so it's in A flat minor. So unfortunately it's in 7 flats, but it makes the fingerings all start from open and nice and easy. And so I started to learn it, quarter note equals 30 or whatever, and played it every day all the way through, very slow, very slow, very slow, very slow, faster and faster and faster and faster. And every once in a while I would check in with Fletch and see where I was at, and I was nowhere close. And then I sort of got about 4 weeks out and put my head down and just went and forgot what the tempos that he was at. I just practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And I got up to about a 195 or 200 or something like that, and thought it was like, this is clear, it's good, it's rocking, it's killing, people are going to love it, it's going to be awesome. And turned on my CD player to listen to Fletch do it, and it was so slow, I thought there was something wrong with my CD player. I don't know anything about electronics, and within about 5 minutes I had the hood of the CD player cover off. I was trying to figure, it must be some sort of power source problem, because it sounds so slow. Indeed, it was just that my brain had sped up and had just put myself in a place where it was time to go to work, and had forgotten what the target was and pushed way past it. So then when I actually played it in public, then after that, the tempos that I was playing at, which were right around Fletch's, felt easy. They felt slow. They felt like I could move in slow motion in front of people and have everybody be thinking, like, how can you move that fast? And have my brain be thinking, So, and that's via repetition. And it was every day for many, many minutes a day, but very slow. And the nice part is that I already learned the chromatic scale, so the whole thing is based on the chromatic scale. So, but that's how that went together. And it was 1 minute of music was about 8 weeks of learning, and then I did it on the tour on a concert, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, if we're going to take it on tour, I have much more to learn. So then we took it on tour, and it started to get easier and easier. I played 60 times and 60 nights on a tour. And then every time since then, which is hundreds of times, the feeling gets easier and easier and easier. And the only way, who asked me the question? Kevin, the only way that I still practice the piece is actually slow motion. So if you've been at a concert that I played it at and you were backstage before the concert, you heard me playing the chromatic scale in A flat minor very slowly over the hardest, weirdest fingering parts of the piece. That's the only way I still play it, is in the practice time, is very slow. But that's what a couple thousand performances will also do for you, which is what unfortunately when you're a student. I mean, the hardest recitals of my life, the hardest concerts of my life were in college, because they were once, and I had no idea how to prepare. Right? It was much better for my students when I was teaching college, because I was telling them things like, hey, touring is the only way to learn. In other words, like that first Marine Band tour was when I really learned what repetition was all about. I got in the band. They're like, you're going to go on tour. There's 2 weeks of rehearsal. I don't like to rehearse. So I was already bored. I had the book memorized. We went on, it was like 60 concerts in 62 days. We had 2 days off, like 30 days a concert, like 20 days, and then 1 more day off, and then like 10 more concerts. So it was a different city every single day. And so it was lots of bus rides, and I thought, man, this is going to be so boring. And then about concert 20, everybody had it memorized, and I heard something so musical and so tight and so effortless. I had never heard anything like that before. And then on concert 30, I heard something that surpassed concert 20 by tenfold. And then by concert 40, I couldn't wait to play every night, because I couldn't wait to hear how unbelievably tight and perfect and effortless it would look, sound, and feel. And then on concert 41, with 19 more concerts to go, I realized for the first time in my life that the only way to have a concert sound as good as it sounds after 40 performances is to have 39 performances. That's the only way. that the only way the band sounds that good after touring for 15 years on the road as a rock and roll group is because they toured for 15 years. And you're not going to manufacture that with 12 rehearsals on a John Mackey piece and a wind ensemble. It's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen when you practice for 12 weeks for a senior recital either. And I think those are really important things to remember. And if you want to try to get around that, don't make the concert or your recital the first stop on tour. Make it the last stop on tour. Make sure that you've taken it on tour. Does it have to play the whole recital everywhere you go? No. Does it have to be a formal concert? No. You can go out in a snowbank and play in front of a hospice home and play a movement of your piece. And somebody will appreciate it, and you will have to perform for an audience. But don't make your recitals in school your first stop on tour. Make them your last stop on tour. They'll go much better. And they'll be much more like real life, which is that you get a chance to repeat things. That most concerts in life are not one-time affairs. They're multiple times you get a chance to do things. Even in a professional orchestra, most of the time they get 3 shots at it in a week. And that, by the way, is a fun way to listen. Like I subscribe to the Digital Concert Hall, which is the Berlin Philharmonic, and I love the live concert on Sunday, which is live, and I love what they've edited together 4 days later when they've taken all the stuff from Thursday, Friday, and Saturday and put it together. But I also like how the band changes through the season. How they sound in September, and when they start rocking and rolling by May or June, it's just unbelievable how much a group of professionals at that level can still come together in a season. And that sort of level of listening is something that I think is also something we should be putting into our practice, which is making sure that we're spending time specifically hanging out, thinking about listening, and trying to hear critically about phrasing, intonation, form, balance, blend. All the types of musical things that we would be expecting someone to tell us about or teach us about if they were our conductor. The way to get your ears to listen in that way is to be specific about your listening and critical with a score. So I think this is a huge part of being able to be where musicality ideas come from, right? Like, is to have lots of listening to be a part of what you're doing. It's not just play your instrument, but like, what are you getting in your brain? If your brain's supposed to respond to tone, what tones are you putting in your head? And if you're putting in the right tones that are going in when you're on receive, like you did a breathing gym exercise to get ready to listen, it's going to imprint better for you. And if you're using a score, which you should be, because by the way, when you're looking at the tuba part to Fountains of Rome, you're looking at an excerpt. Even if you're looking at the whole part, it's still an excerpt, right? When you're looking at the Hindemith Tuba Sonata, the tuba part, it's still an excerpt. It's not the whole piece. The piano part's missing. So make sure that you're investing in scores and looking at scores and learning how to read them so that you have a layered ability to your ears, that you don't just hear in tuba, but that you can hear in all sorts of ways and in all aspects of music because you've studied it that way. Cool! These are great questions. You guys were wonderful tonight. I hope you learned something. And in the back of my PDF stack is all my information about how to get a hold of me. My email's there, my cell phone's there, and the ways that you can find me on social media are there as well. So I would encourage all of you to patiently get a hold of me if you've got some more questions, and I'd be more than delighted to try to help you out or steer you in a way that gives you some more clarity about some concept in playing or music. So, and thanks as always to Long and McQuaid for hosting this and for having me in. We had a it seems almost surreal that we did what we did, Adam. It was like a year and a half ago, right? Yeah, with a tour across Canada, like a one night all the way across all the major cities in Canada was really fun. Right, exactly, right. I saw a temperature I didn't think existed on the planet in Regina, Saskatchewan, so it was so cold there. But thank you to all those folks that are doing this and hosting and for doing what you've done during this pandemic in terms of being available to people to continue to try to make music in a time when they desperately need it. And if you're a musician who's down and out about how the concert scene has been going, just stay strong and keep practicing, because there's a whole gigantic world that needs a huge amount of healing that will come at the hands of live music. And they will need all of us and all of our abilities to help them heal and feel good and joyful again when we are able to gather as a live community in a concert hall again someday. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate you all. I love all these names. Music Man Can Walk. And Sam Million, if that's your name, man, you should be selling real estate. I think we got them all. I hope so. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to see all of you. Take care. Hope to see you again soon.